Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the February 23rd, 2026 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present, and we have two of our student reps, Humsini and Sarah. We have one topic on the agenda, K-5 ELA Instructional Resource Adoption Process and Context Update. Dr. Holman.
Yes, and so we have some guests here tonight to provide us with, I'll say, an experience to dive into the literacy adoption. I apologize, Director Richter sent me an email about the study session and just was kind of thinking through, curriculum versus accelerating learning and growth and how they're not the same. And that's a very short, quick summary of more topics than just that. But it kind of got me thinking about what's the purpose of adopting curriculum, and the critical nature of curriculum is what allows teachers the tools to be able to possibly accelerate growth and learning for our students. And so, while it isn't the only aspect of that, it's a key piece to giving teachers tools to then take action on diagnosing needs of students and addressing deficits and gaps and accelerating the learning of all students. And that isn't just curriculum, that's instructional practices, that's a commitment to always growing and professional development and learning. And so I really appreciated that question, because you're absolutely right that it's adopting a curriculum without all of those other things really is meaningless. Because if your practice is stagnant, well, it doesn't matter what curriculum you have as a teacher, but if you're always growing, you're always learning, you're always working to improve your practice, and you have an updated, modernized curriculum that actually works to address the needs of the array of learners in your classroom, you have a better shot at accelerating learning. And so this is a process that's been going on for a number of years, and so our crew will share with us tonight just the work to date and some timelines ahead. So, I don't know, Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Just a couple of additional words to think about framing for this. One of the things I want to highlight is the complex, thoughtful work that the teaching and learning team has been doing over several years. And like Dr. Holman said, this is not do a curriculum adoption and then we're done. This is a bit of a midpoint in thinking about the ongoing process for informing the instruction of teachers, so it really makes a difference to our students. I also wanted to highlight that over the years, the definition of instructional resources has really changed. That way back in the day, we'd adopt a textbook and then we'd revisit it maybe 14 years later. And the way that we think about resources now is much more dynamic, much more student-centered, much more responsive, and therefore much more complex. So when we look at an adoption, it's not like we get a textbook and then we don't think about it for some years. It's really being deeply thoughtful about what are all the different other factors that come into play. And you'll hear a lot of the work that the team has been doing to consider what those other factors are and really be thoughtful about how does this create coherence in the instructional model for our students in ways that affects both their, how they live in the experience and then their achievement. So with that, I will hand it over to Kelly Pease and to Whitney Blackstone from the teaching and learning team.
Great. Thank you. I'm glad to be here to talk about the amazing process we've been going through for our ELA adoption, and know that we're going to bring a resource to our teachers and subsequently to our students that is going to be accelerative in nature. So as we think about literacy, I'd like us to choral read this quote. Literacy is a bridge from misery to hope. It is a tool for daily life in modern society. It is a bulwark against poverty and a building block of development. For everyone, everywhere, literacy is, along with education in general, a basic human right. And so that's how we enter our work, that literacy drives equitable opportunities for student success, and we know that if students are learning to read by the end of third grade, that they're exponentially accelerative throughout the rest of their career and go on to college and future success. So during our time together today, we're going to talk about our literacy story, kind of where we've been, why new materials now, an overview of the selection process, and then what our next steps are between now and the start of next school year and beyond. So I believe you received this prompt before today, and I'm interested in kind of hearing from you, what's your dream for every elementary student in our district? What do we want them to be able to do as a reader, writer, speaker, and thinker? And what is a bold, aspirational literacy outcome you want for most of our learners?
First of all, thank you for starting off with these questions. I looked at the first one as not necessarily literacy, but just the overall bigger dream. And I said my dream is that every child feels seen, supported, and confident in their own learning, and that our system adapts to students, not the other way around.
I think I viewed the question similarly and have nearly the same answer. That they feel safe, known, and excited to come to school each day. We are helping to build a human, and I want them to feel like valued members of their community. My dream is that strengths are recognized, differences are valued, and their needs are thoughtfully supported.
As usual, I got too focused, and I read that as, what is your dream for every elementary school in our district in terms of literacy? Unfortunately. So my dream just in terms of that is that I would really like reading to be just effortless and pleasurable for every student, because I think that's the dream. I never want it to be the thing holding them back. Are we doing just the first one?
Are we doing just the first one? I'm just doing the first one.
Okay. I'm going to leave it for there for now.
That every student can see themselves as a reader and a writer and somebody who can be a person of words.
For me, it is every student being able to show the world everything that they're capable of. I also cheated a little bit. I was volunteering in my little one's school today, and they actually have they asked all of us as parents, what is your dream for your child? And they asked the kids too. So I just took a peek at some of the other parent responses, and they were a lot along those same lines. I saw being kind, being successful in life, dreaming big, sort of those, the forward-looking, big future goals. One kid wanted to bake the best cinnamon rolls ever, and I thought that was a good dream too. Yeah.
So in thinking about what I've heard from you, it's really we're educating the whole child so that they have personal well-being and success and are able to access anything they choose to in their lives. So thank you for that. Oh, go away. I'm sorry.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So me and Sarah also read the questions and came up with our own answers, like in our student view. It's been a while since I've been an elementary school kid, but one thing that I said was like creativity, exploration, and engagement, like being able to like have their own thought process and encouraging creative problem solving to like. And also another thing I said was like in SEL, like awareness on neurodivergence. I think bringing that beforehand, like in the elementary years potentially. I'm not sure about the age of the kid, but like bringing that into the curriculum would be interesting to see.
Okay, and then I said that my dream was that every elementary schooler would want to come to school and they want to learn. So this includes all the students feeling like they belong so that they'll want to come to school, and also the classes being engaging so that they'll want to learn.
Lindsay, would you like to start on your thoughts on question 2?
Yes, thank you. So I want students to use reading, writing, responding, and thinking as connected tools, not separate skills. And yes, I say responding because as a parent of a minimally speaking child, using the word speaker or speaking automatically leaves my child out of those sort of hopes and dreams. And I want students to access information, make sense of ideas, express themselves in ways that work for them. Ultimately, I want them to use literacy to understand the world and to shape it.
Are we doing reader, writer, speaker, and thinker here? Yes. Okay, I wrote a lot, so I'll cut it down a little. As readers, I want every elementary student to be able to decode fluently and make meaning from a wide range of material with confidence and curiosity. I would love to see them see reading as both a source of knowledge and joy. As writers, I want them to express their ideas clearly and authentically, using writing to inform, persuade, and tell their stories. As speakers, and I also added and listeners, because I think listening is such an important part of this process. I want students to communicate thoughtfully, ask questions, collaborate, and engage in meaningful dialogue with people whose perspectives may differ from their own. And as thinkers, I want them to be curious, reflective, and resilient problem solvers, able to analyze information, consider multiple viewpoints, and apply their learning to real-world situations.
For reader, it really goes back to my first point about just want them to take joy in reading and for it to be something that is unconsciously easy, just something that can be done and that you can explore the world through. As far as reader, speaker, and thinker goes, I actually paused just a little bit because I could feel the pressure to be a perfect student in that question, to always be, writing the best, being the perfect public speaker, to do the best thinking job on the test. And instead, I just went with what I would really like for every student is that they are able to express their thoughts to the degree they want and to be understood by those around them. And this is also based on my student, rather like Director Yoakum, who for several years in elementary was using a scribe or speech to text or other ways to get thoughts on paper or e-paper. And by doing so, actually often got voted by the class as having like the most engaging story, the best, best book report. And so it is about communication and about each child feeling able to express themselves to me.
I want our students to be equipped with the skills, tools, and I guess mindset to continue growing in these domains after they leave the district. I come at this with my own personal experience, my own personal lens of these skills for me are things that developed later in life, are still developing later in life. So I think that for me, when I think about ELA, it's uniquely, I was going to be brief, but now I'm not. It's something you uniquely, I think you continue to grow and develop as you go into adulthood. Depending on, I think for everyone, math is something that maybe you don't think about math and develop math skills at all again after you graduate from high school or college. And I don't think that's the case for ELA.
For me, I was thinking along the lines of Director Richter of communication being the key piece of that and being able to communicate thoughts and just thinking philosophically, about oral language is what makes us uniquely human. And then written language on top of that, is such a new invention that our brains aren't even built for it. When we learn to read, we're repurposing other parts of our brain that were built for other things because it's so uniquely human to be able to not just communicate thoughts orally, but also to be able to write them down and then share them through time and space. And so I was probably going way more philosophical than this bullet was actually asking for, but just thinking about what an amazing feat that is for us as humans, and wanting every single one of our students to be able to participate in that incredible process, and understanding that it may look different for different students. You know, as some other folks said, I have my own personal experiences with that, and how do you make sure that everybody is part of that world and able to experience that?
So I'll first talk about like the writing and speaking, because I kind of clumped them in together. I said that like being able to write questions or express concern regarding a topic that they don't understand or are curious about, like related to like engagement with the curriculum, and also like asking back again relating to curiosity, like I believe like asking a lot of questions when interested can fuel curiosity. And then for reading, I said being able to like read or understand texts that are their grade level, or allow them to like explore different kinds of books with various themes related potentially to like kindness, creativity, and imagination, which also relates back to creativity. And also I also said that I have a strong hope that if children are weak in a certain subject or struggling in certain aspects, they're brave enough to ask for help and have a good understanding that it's okay to be not as good as one aspect in academic skills than their peers.
I also grouped reading and writing because I think that reading books is one way that students, especially in elementary school, develop these skills. So I was hoping that they would enjoy reading books. And I think that the way books are introduced and like reading is introduced in schools and like how it's incorporated into the learning can drive like a lot of how if students want to read books outside of school. So I just hope that they enjoy reading books so that they can keep building their reading and writing skills. I also hope that for thinking that they ask questions and that the classes that they're in are just challenging enough where they don't feel overwhelmed and confused, but they still feel like there's room for them to grow. And then for speaking, I want them to be comfortable voicing their opinions in front of their peers, asking questions, like presenting projects or like sharing during show and tell in front of the class, because I think this is like where public speaking skills are built. And I think projects from like elementary school really helped me become a better speaker, even in like, I still use these same skills in high school, so.
What's the bold aspirational literacy outcome you want for our learners?
This was hard, and I was trying to be really broad. I want literacy to give kids agency and joy. It's kind of, I could go on, but I think that might just sum it up.
I also used that. I said, using literacy as a tool for agency in their lives, and not just seeing literacy as a benchmark, but as a tool for empowerment. And having every learner seeing themselves as a capable reader, an authentic writer, and a lifelong learner. And I think a common thread in these questions for me is I was just talking to a friend last week about a book called The Disengaged Teen. And so this is teen related, but they identify, 4 key learning modes, which I'm sure several of you are familiar with. But it's the passenger, which is most kind of coasting, doing minimum effort, the achiever, the resistor, but then the explorer is really the goal, like intrinsically motivated, curious, and active learners. And so all these questions for me kept getting me thinking about the explorer, like how do we help support explorers?
That was a really good one. See, I went deeply practical, and I just outcome for our learners. I was thinking about our results outcomes, those sorts of things, and I would just love if every child came out of kindergarten reading. But it's a very different flavor from what was answered.
That every student likes or maybe even loves literacy, like writing, reading. Yep.
For me, all students literate by third grade, and like emphasis on the all. I was having a conversation a while back with a teacher, not a Lake Washington teacher, but she said, I've been teaching for 10 years and I've never had a student on an IEP be at grade level on reading. Yeah, that was kind of the face that I made. There's no exclusions there. All means all. So getting all students to that place by third grade. And also, I know we'll be focused on elementary tonight, and that's fine, but also I want great outcomes for our secondary learners too. To Director Liberty's point, it's not like, okay, we've got them reading, at the end of third grade, and now, we stop. There's skills that need to continue developing all the way through school, and making sure that that's part of the conversation, because we know from our results policies that we see wonderful growth for our students through those first few years of elementary, but it then kind of flatlines at middle and high school. And so a bold outcome I would like to see is for that to change.
I said, I think Sarah also bring this up. I said stronger public speaking abilities and like increased self-confidence in one's abilities is what I said.
I said that I hope that students genuinely enjoy reading, and not just like elementary schoolers, but I feel like when students hit late middle school, high school, then they stop reading, whether that's because they just don't have time anymore or because like they have other things they could do like social media. But like Eric said, I think that literacy is something that you're going to spend the rest of your life learning. So I think that more high schoolers and like middle schoolers reading outside of school would be good.
Thank you all for sharing your responses to our Open Our Dream statement. And I think you'll see connections to your dream as we go through, and we're able to highlight some of the areas in which we really focused on for the adoption of new curricular materials. So we know that our goal is all students literate by the end of third grade. And for those of you who've heard me talk about this before, it's mission critical that they're reading by third grade. Due to the reasoning behind that is that students who are not reading by third grade, it takes exponentially more time, resource, effort to get them reading. So we need to be able to get them literate and able to access text, because there's also that shift in third grade from learning to read to reading to learn, which is what all of you shared around that goal of all students continually learning about their world and environment and et cetera, to ensure that they have successful access to all of their hopes and dreams. So you're going to see throughout the presentation today that our process of our literacy adoption, as well as the look-forwards that were inherent in what we were, when we were evaluating our tools, you'll see our OEs show significantly. We had parents and parents as key stakeholders in our committee. We also have done a parent night to provide them with opportunities to see the curricular tool as well as give feedback on that. And we see that our caretakers and community and families are really at the heart of, they're their child's first teacher. They're the people that the kids are interacting with in public and when they're out living their typical, kindergarten through fifth grade life. So we think about those perspectives of the people who are their first teachers are very important. We also know that our learning environments are really important. I heard agency talked about a lot, and we really want students to take ownership of their own learning, and we'll share some professional learning we've done around student agency in the classroom. And then, of course, our curriculum and the resources we have in the instructional program is clear. It also provides students with learning aligned to standards, and we'll talk a little bit more about standards as we go through our time together today, and that there are ways to measure and progress monitor so we're meeting kids where they are and accelerating their learning where maybe they need a little more support. And then, of course, equity is at the epicenter. Reading is at the epicenter of equity, and without students learning to read, we are building in an equitable system and country. So it's important that all students have that access. So when we talk about our values, these are from our student profile, and you will also see very much aligned to what you shared earlier, as well as our what you'll see highlighted through some of our adoption look-fors, and then at the end of the day, our student profile, so have students able to actualize through learning to read all of the components of our student profile. So we worked with the Reading Advisory to provide us with a vision for literacy instruction in Lake Washington. And I think what is really important is that we're cultivating a love of reading and empowering students with skills and confidence to be lifelong learners and effective communicators. And so how we do that is really through looking at each student and tailoring instruction to meet the needs of all learners. That our expectations for every student or each student is really a high level of rigor. We expect that teachers in classrooms are teaching foundational literacy to all students and meeting them where they're at with their ability to accelerate student learning, from filling potential gaps in their learning to really accelerating those students who already have it. We're going to show you Scarborough's Rope in a little bit, and those of you who've been around a while are like, oh yeah, I get to see Scarborough's Rope again. But that we really are looking for students to have the access and engagement to build background knowledge through our literacy work as well, that they're reading to learn about things, and when you're reading to learn and you have background knowledge, the reading of the text is easier because you have knowledge to hook what you're reading about to as you go through learning about science or social studies. So as we think about that a system is never the sum of its parts, it's the production of their interaction. And so the onus is on the district as a whole to build systems and provide resources for teachers and building principals to be able to implement effective literacy instruction. It's clarity around what that looks like and what our expectations are for our students. And from there, the school is heavily interactive with this, especially with the school principal being the instructional leader in the building and providing scaffolds and supports to teachers, and using the greatness that is within their schools to share. We have several times we take teachers on learning walks, and we're able to take teachers to see other teachers work. And there's nothing better than seeing something in practice by one of your peers to really enhance your understanding of what that looks like. And then where the rubber hits the road is in the classroom, and it's where students have opportunities to learn to decode. They have opportunities for choice and agency around what they're accessing as far as text and activities to enhance their reading ability, as well as teachers having the skills and the tools to be able to accelerate reading for all students. Our priority is student growth, whether you are not yet at standard or if you have attained standard, that we're continually supporting to grow. As part of the literacy adoption, we really think about what are those system-wide components, because there's intersectionality between what the state expects of us, as well as what systems and structures we're putting in place. And so you'll see everything from we're meeting the state requirements, we're following all of the legislation that is around reading, which helps us clearly define state expectations, and the state expectations are very much aligned with what our philosophical beliefs and system implementation is looking like. We've done significant work with building administrators around what is effective literacy practice. When we move to adopt a new curricular tool, we'll be working directly with principals on what does that look like and having conversations on how do you lead that in your building. Because with CLT and building principals as instructional leaders, we're all promoting and understand the work that is happening in classrooms. So data that we use around universal screening, you're familiar with that as far as FastBridge, and we give benchmark assessments 3 times a year. We use progress monitoring in our intervention program, our safety net programs, to determine are kids growing or not, and we look at 6-week increments to make determinations, do we need to shift to another tool? All of the growth in literacy happens because we're making data-informed decisions, and that's using satellite data like the SBA, like FastBridge, and it's also using multiple measures in the classroom to get a clear picture and talking with students about their experiences to get a clear picture of what the student needs next to be accelerative. So as we think about the system aligning, we want the screening to inform the data, to inform the instruction based on standards. And then we know that if we're at a point in Lake Washington where we are really focusing on what does Tier 1 instruction look like? What does it look like in every classroom? And how do we support teachers to be able to use that Tier 1 instructional time to be accelerative for students. Really small group intentionality is an expectation that we've had this for the past 2 years around small group instruction is happening in each classroom, which means that we're using data to determine what kids need and we're grouping them and being accelerative at their just right level. And so as we think about what lays the foundation for our literacy work are really the science of reading principles. And I'm not going to read through all of the principles on this slide. I know that you had the opportunity to preview the PowerPoint before today, but really thinking about honoring students, building background knowledge, learning to decode text to access, and that the thing that really we've been working on with YouFly, and we'll talk about that a little bit, is that connection between reading and writing, and that decoding, which is sounding out words, with encoding, which is spelling, is so intertwined, and we're seeing some really positive results with where YouFly is being implemented with Fidelity. So as we think about the science of reading is like the big picture of what we're looking for as far as instruction that's happening in our school district. And I think sometimes when we hear science of reading, we will often jump to its structured literacy or its foundational literacy. And so the structured reading is the big picture of how, and this is Scarborough's rope, where all of the pieces work together, decoding and comprehension, which equates to reading comprehension. So our goal is that we have no frayed portions of our reading rope, and that they're all working simultaneously together to, after 3rd grade or before 3rd grade for some of our students, that they're able to comprehend what they read and make meaning of it. So as we think about the science of reading, I wanted to share this with you because I think sometimes there are some things about science of reading that there are some misconceptions around it. So it's an evidence-based body of research that's happened over decades, that it can happen in English, in our dual programs in Spanish. It focuses on how reading proficiency develops, and then talks it's something that varies across grade level, because in kindergarten, what you're doing in teaching reading is different than what you're doing in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and then on in high school as well. But it's not this single component of learning to decode. That isn't the science of reading. It's the whole idea of learning to read, and it's here to stay. It's been, I think, when I started teaching, I'll age myself a little bit. In 1991, we were very much aligned to science of reading. We took a very balanced approach in that we didn't put foundational skills above comprehension. We didn't, so there are lots of things, and I have lots of stories that I'll tell you another day about my evolution in really landing on the science of reading as the most important thing. And so we think about, it's not just good for one student, it's imperative for all students. So, and as we think about the science of reading, it's that foundation that informs structured literacy practices. And we think about that structured literacy as those specific teaching methods, those systems, those explicit systems that teachers use to align with the science of reading principles, and then informed by the science of reading to incorporate evidence-based practices. So structured literacy is a component and specific teaching methods that supports the science of reading. Whit, is there anything you would like to add about science of reading or structured literacy? No? Okay. Sometimes I'm like, wait, did I get it? How'd I do? So this is an interesting data point. Of course, Jen.
So with that, just to lean into the work that Lake Washington's done for years, this isn't new to us. Like, this is a chance to really think about where we are in implementation and what the tools are, but science of reading is something that, like, that's been what Whitney's been doing day in and day out for a long time, and Kelly's been leading that work as well. So this is a chance for us to think, what's the impact thus far, and what are the ways that we adjust?
Yeah. And so as we look at this chart, it's or this pie graph, it's really interesting that what this is telling us is that 50% of students will learn to read with explicit and direct instruction on foundational skills. 15% will need additional time, support, and repetitions. 30%, and I want you to think about that number, 30% of our students will learn to read without any instruction. You know, how some people will say, oh, it's innate. That's unique. That's not the norm in how students evolve to reading. And then 5% will likely need additional repetitions or specialized instruction due to cognitive disabilities. We don't like that word disability in there. We like due to being striving readers or due to additional complex learning needs. So as we think about learning to read, I want you to kind of keep this in mind and think about maybe your own student or students you know. And if you've been volunteering in classrooms, when you're in a reading classroom, just look around and think about 50% of the students need the direct. Some need time, 30% get it, and 5% need more. And we've aligned our curricular resources to meet the 70% that need something other than just knowing how to read. So tightly aligned to our end results, and I'm going to show a couple of data slides from ER, from end results 2, to make a point around who we need to continue to accelerate learning, and part of the reason why we need to be able to adopt a series that has those resources embedded in it to accelerate reading. So as we look at this data, it's important to understand that we are seeing the trends. These are national trends of students, and it doesn't make it okay. But Lake Washington is aligned with national trends of Black, Hispanic students in special education and students living in poverty not achieving at the same level as students who are not in those specific demographics. And you'll see clearly the gap that we see between different racial groups in our system. So this is more of the moral imperative of we need a resource in schools that help to be accelerative for every student. Anything there, Jen, that you wanted to?
I think that's the evolution of our reporting. So this is straight out of R2 from October, a couple slides from there. So really looking at in past iterations of reporting, or in like thinking overall, like the slide that Kelly showed, 17, that had the 95% of students learn to read using instruction. Like, that's really general, and we have very strong interest that I know the board shares, and I know Dr. Holman, you said this very specifically. When looking at instructional resources, we need to really focus in on the students that we need to accelerate their learning. We need to, like, the historical disparities are something that are front and center for the adoption. And so that's something Kelly and Whitney and team have really been looking at as we go through, is not just what's generally a good resource in a general way, but really specifically, how does this process help develop our systemic mindset around what we choose and then how we implement it so that it's very, very targeted.
Thanks, Jen. So if we think about resources that have come into Lake Washington over the past, I will say, decade, in 2014, we selected the Wonders curriculum, and there's legacy around. I see Dr. Holman kind of like twitching a little, but Wonders was not an easy transition from what we were doing previously, and read well. Yeah, so I think that we're part of what, so currently we have ongoing implementation of Wonders. We've brought in Lexia 5 and Lexia English, which is a online computer adaptive assessment where we really think about, it's not something to put students on for hours a day. It's, 15 minutes, total of 45 minutes a week. What is it for the littles? For
it varies. So
for like kindergarten, first grade.
Yeah, it varies. So it takes the data from the progress, and then it auto generates every week. It updates target goals for units gained and or minutes. And so it could be, if students are performing like well above grade level, it could give them a recommended minutes of 0 up to like 80 minutes. It doesn't ever exceed 80 minutes for the week, although we don't typically suggest that students work on the computer for 80 minutes in the week on that. Yeah,
Thanks, Whit. And then 5 years ago we implemented Heggerty, which is a phonemic awareness curriculum in K2 classrooms. Our expectation there is that every K2 student has the opportunity to practice phonemic awareness during their school day. We have teachers who do it when they're walking the students, do Heggerty when they're walking students to lunch. They do it when it's part of their morning circle or their afternoon circle. So it's becoming part of the ethos of what happens during their school day, not necessarily during the reading block. And as far as interventions go, probably 8 to 10 years ago, we did, when the dyslexia legislation came out, so that was 2018 was when we implemented SIPs, and that was really to think about if we have students who are receiving specially designed instruction for reading, or students who were in safety net. We did an adoption process for a curriculum tool that would focus on students with potential for reading difficulty, including dyslexia.
So if we zoom out just a little bit to think about the kind of work, this is really typical for an adoption in terms of thinking about Wonders was the core adoption years ago, and as we started implementing, we continued to see needs that Kelly led or other folks led, really looking at what's the specific need that we have, what's the tool that would meet that, how do we pilot and implement, and having that be kind of ongoing. So you'll see like the ongoing those were new at one time, and they've now become ongoing. The expanding, again, or Kelly can talk about the specifics, but really the key point is these are pieces where we've looked at what's the need in our system, what's the resource, and how do we pull that in. And that goes to your point, Director Guthrie, when you talked a while ago about like the one question you're going to ask of every curriculum is what's missing. And so this is our ongoing thinking about, like, we're constantly thinking what's missing, how do we respond to it?
Yeah, and we think about how 3 years ago, UFly was just coming out, and we thought it's an evidence-based program that teaches foundational skills to students, and if that was implemented in small group instruction with fidelity, we would see accelerative growth. And so as we reflect on UFly, it didn't initially, we started with folks that were interested, we did a pilot, and then saw results with students and said, oh my gosh, every K2 student has a right to accelerative reading via UFly. Whitney's done a lot of amazing work with going out to schools and sitting with groups of teachers, because we know the best way to work with a team is in a smaller PLC group by grade level. She's done some cross-grade level training with UFly. We're in the process of piloting UFly taught whole group in kindergarten, because that's the grade level where kids come in with the most common entry point. As we get into first and second grade, it becomes more varied. So do you want to just share a tiny bit about? Okay, all right. And so then as we think of, Jen's like, Cal, come on, I know you love this stuff and you want to just talk all about it. All right, so then, all right, okay, I got it. I'm on it. I just am thorough. So just thinking about the things you see here, the things that are expanding are basically things we heard from teachers that were not shored up with the current resources that we had, and so we responded to that. The challenge right now in the 2026 is it's not 1991 anymore, where when you'd hear about something new would either be through the magazine you got in the mail or through a conference if you were lucky enough to go, if there were very many conferences to go to. And now the information we're getting is just in time. So I just think as we see something that would accelerate student learning, it's really important that we take a look at it. And so as we think about professional learning that's happened in the system, again, it's been responsive to what we hear from teachers and what new systems and structures we've been brought into place. And so I'm happy to unpack this at a future date if you'd like me to.
And we can definitely pause for questions. The two big sections left to go. So this was the picture of where we are in Lake Washington and what we're looking at in kind of the overall landscape of literacy adoption. And then the next pieces are going to be looking at why new materials now, some of the other context around that, and then what the process is for new materials. So we can definitely pause for questions or comments thus far.
All right, so why new materials now? So our current materials were adopted and implemented in 2014. A lot has changed in the science of reading since 2014, and really thinking about having our teachers have the best tool with the most evidence-based research that align to our standards to use with our students. So if we think about our current state, we've got teachers learning at high levels around instructional strategies that support student learning. The Washington State standards are Washington State is developing their own ELA standards, and they're taking a shift away from Common Core. And I'll show you kind of what those big shifts will be in a few minutes. With a growing focus on skills, knowledge building, and comprehension, we're well positioned to move into these materials to support these instructional priorities. A simple one is that the publisher of Wonders is discontinuing the digital platform, and so therefore we wouldn't have it available in the future, which we'd be moving whether that was happening or not. And then what has happened as a result of us not having a robust curricular tool and that we've been adding on to, is that teachers are finding ways to scaffold with things that maybe aren't as evidence-based. And really, we want to be thinking about, because they're wanting to do what's in the best interest of their students. So we want in Lake Washington, we want teachers to be able to have the curriculum resources they need to teach kids to read. And so as we think about all of the slides that I'm sharing now are really about the things that we took into consideration as we moved through the adoption process. And Lisa serves on our adoption committee and has probably seen these slides several times. And this just summarizes a lot of what we shared earlier about the science of reading and what our hope for is in our vision. So just thinking about, this is the vision for what will happen with what the experience all students will have in classrooms.
One thing to call out, I think, on that, on the vision is the high levels of rigor for all students, I think goes to the agency and the relevancy to all students. And that may have been something that was not as center in our literacy materials in the past, but really thinking about how all students are accessing rigorous learning, and thinking about the visit to Thoreau that the board had a couple weeks ago, and thinking about that kind of learning is front and center.
So what we believe is if we supply students and teachers with high quality standards-aligned instructional materials and professional learning, we'll accomplish our goals. We'll have coherent learning across our district using evidence-based curricular tools. Students will have the skills to read, so they'll be able to read to learn by the end of 3rd grade or before, and that each student will demonstrate growth. So there will be equitable outcomes for all kids, which is aligned to what your dream was earlier today. So selection process overview, this is aligned with Board Policy 2020 and 2020P. And that as we think about connecting instruction in the selection process, materials must support the new instructional expectations. They align to our standards. They support foundational reading and knowledge building. And there's consistency across classrooms and grade levels. So we formed a committee. This committee went a little bit longer than a typical committee because there were a couple influences. One was the knowledge and evidence of what effective reading is has evolved so much. I would say it's been accelerative in the past 5 years or so. We're learning so much so quickly. And the fact that we had a social studies, there were 2 adoptions that were supposed to happen simultaneously, social studies and reading, and we thought that we wanted to give teachers the opportunity to get to know the science curriculum, and then we'd bring the literacy curriculum in. And what we'll find in both of the tools that we're looking at is that the building knowledge matches with our science and social studies units, so we'll be able to do some cross content work around integration with those. But the committee really, we did some learning, some shared understanding. All committee members had the opportunity to learn about how to teach structured literacy. We developed a rubric to evaluate our tools by. We reviewed curriculum. We're in the process of piloting it right now. Once we make a decision at the end of this month on which tool we'll use and then bring it to the board for approval, we'll then get going on our implementation plan. Actually, to be honest, we're already talking about our implementation plan in a broad sense, even before we know what the tool is, so that teachers have ample opportunity to have access to the tools before next school year and some technical understanding of the resources prior.
One comment I'd make, and I apologize because it was probably something we talked about on the slide in the previous section if I hadn't rushed you through, is that... Oh! I know, sorry.
I'll turn
is that the implementation plan, so we've been thinking about literacy instruction, of course, for years, and really thinking like that iterative thing that we look at every year, how we're doing, how we adjust our instruction. And the learning that teachers have been experiencing for the past several years has been really focused on literacy. So for example, was it a year ago August, so not this past August, but the year before, all elementary teachers engaged in a cross-district learning event where they were, the right to read. Yeah, the right to read. And then, so we've been working on that for a couple of years now to have that learning be in place. So while the formal implementation plan will come once the recommendation happens, the learning around practices has been going on for several years. That's actually been the focus of, and actually intertwined with equity learning. K-5 teachers have been learning about how literacy and equity and the science of reading are together. And so we've been focused on that. So I just wanted to say that as part of the implementation plan. The formal one will come, and so much learning has already been in the works.
So the scope of the reading advisory, we really looked at, we knew to make an effective decision, an evidence-based decision, a responsible decision about the tool we bring into the system. We really did a lot of background work and building knowledge with teachers around what are those pieces that should be in our tool. And what's been fun to watch teachers, they're so smart about what they need now. And so it's, I think that getting to Lisa's point, when we have what's missing, I think that we'll be able to, by the teachers having participated in the pilot, and then because the work of evaluation and at the implementation, it isn't done. So all through the next few years, we'll be really looking at what are the things, do we discover, oh gosh, we really need this thing, and really bring something evidence-based in through the curriculum adoption, but then always be seeking like that question of what else, what next. So we had vendors submit tools for us to look at, and then we narrowed it and piloted 2 tools, and then we are making a recommendation here at the probably in April to you. The people involved in the committee were cross-departmental as well as committee composition, and we were very intentional about the composition to have representative from every elementary school in the district, so that it will essentially, when we go to implementation, there will be a resident expert on site to help support and answer questions and be a conduit directly to us around what's going well. Similar to what we've done with social studies, we keep a pulse through the committee members on what's going well with implementation and where are some resources, additional professional learning and such that they may need. So the standard shift I talked about is really thinking about the shift from Common Core to the 4 shifts around the complex range, the quality and complexity of text, practicing with complex text and academic vocabulary, reading and writing and speaking grounded in evidence from both literacy and informational text. So it's not just reading a story and it's not just researching a project, but it's the full. And our science and social studies curriculum really lend themselves well to that reading and writing of informational text. And then really the end game is knowledge building. So OSPI's shift to knowledge building through content-rich nonfiction is something that we're excited to draw through lines for with our new resource. So these are all of the things you learned about earlier today around the things that are important in a literacy curricula. And so just for future reference, we really went everything from handwriting to spelling to word recognition to background knowledge to comprehension. So that, and the fact that reading and writing are very much intertwined. So the first thing we did was did a request for information, and we received 10 companies submitted information to us about their tools. And then we were looking for curricular tools that had foundational literacy and background knowledge embedded in them, that there was Spanish language editions available for our dual language program. They were most recently reviewed and meet the standards, and we run them through before we even look at them, technical privacy and accessibility standards. So out of the 6 that met our requirements, we had we used the bias screening from OSPI. We had a cross collaboration where Molly came in and did, who is in the student success and student excellence department. I'm trying, and really gave the group a training on how you bias and identifying bias. And so after screening for bias, we invited 3 vendors to present to us. We used the rubric the pre-developed rubric that we made based on what we had learned about reading and the science of reading. And then based on that, the advisory participants narrowed us down to pilot 2 curriculum materials. And I just shared this with you. So we did rubric scoring, we had empathy feedback from students and teachers. Their community survey has been deployed, and advisory input and costs. So as we were thinking about what are we going to move forward with, as they're in the pilot right now, we're almost done. Our second pilot will end at the end of this week, the end of this week. And so we'll come together on March 2nd to debrief that and then move forward to a decision. So through the pilot process, we had a full day of publisher training, where we had the expectation of they would do a minimum of a unit, because we felt like doing less than a unit or trying to do multiple units would water down the process. We really wanted them to fully understand. Partway through the pilot, we had invited the vendors in to do mid-pilot check-ins. So our team was able to go out and sit with teachers as they worked with the vendor on asking questions that they had regarding implementation. We saw a model lesson. A couple of teachers just wanted to ask questions about specific components. And so we were able to do that with both tools. And our expectation was that they use it with fidelity as intended, and that we'd receive feedback from both students and teachers. So we're in the process of putting together, I still have one more empathy interview to input into our database, to look at the empathy interviews that we asked students and teachers about how the pilot was going, and asked the students how that curricular tool felt to them. And so we'll also bring that back to the committee when it comes time for decision making. And then the 2 that we've ended up piloting were Benchmark Advance and Emerge. And they meet the criteria set forth that we set through the RFI and the screening that we did. And we are currently, as I said, wrapping up and doing our pilot debrief next week. And I'm excited to have that part done. So then the next meeting we can come and have a discussion and make a decision on which tool we will recommend to you. So as through the empathy interview feedback, we really had individual conversations with students and teachers, and caregivers and community members had opportunities to provide data to us by survey. So that will also be brought back into the decision at the end of March. And so as we think about moving toward the program recommendation, it's really important that it meets the expectations, the most current research. It's aligned with the district goals of rigorous learning for all students, and that there would be guaranteed and viable curriculum implementation across all schools. And we know that the onus is on us as a system to develop the support that teachers need to implement with fidelity. This is just a summary of our timeline. And so the thing that we're most looking forward to is 26, 27, when we have these amazing resources in the hands of our teachers. And our next steps are complete the pilot. We're collecting and discussing feedback and making our recommendations. And so March 24th is the day that we'll come together and have something to you soon thereafter. So exciting. And then should the board approve, we would continue to learn with teachers, support our teachers and building administrators, communicate with our stakeholders, and really think about what is that two-way engagement we can have with a curricular tool to help caregivers have tools and resources to support learning outside of the school day, and then to be able to progress monitor and see how are we doing towards with implementation, and continue to do some gap analysis. So, revisiting your dream statement. And questions first? Of course, let's do questions first.
Director Yoakum.
I just have a question about the pilot process, and maybe I just missed that. Does every teacher in the committee pilot this? And do they only pilot one of them? They do both of them. So okay.
So it depends on it goes both ways sometimes, but for this pilot, they piloted both tools because we didn't feel, I think you could get a little bit positional, especially with reading, around which tool, if you haven't seen both of them, they're more familiar with. So both tools, and then it might not have been a teacher in every school. We had safety net teachers try some focus lessons. We had coaches teaming up with a teacher and teaching lessons, teaching reading in their classrooms. So.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
When I'm looking at the pilot process slide, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, and I don't understand. Minimum of 1 unit used with at least 1 class?
In each school.
In each school. So a class okay, got it. Thank you. I was trying to think as a teacher, you don't have more than 1 class.
No,
so I was trying to figure
school.
out.
I'm sorry for the confusion.
No, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying, Lindsay. Yeah, thank you.
Director Richter.
I guess I'm kind of thinking of R2, and by the way, love everything I hear. But I'm just thinking about the data that's going to come out of it, and how will we be able to monitor and see the effect that the new tool has had, compare it to now, see how kids are moving through, and especially just longitudinally tracking and seeing if it's making a difference, and just if you have any thoughts on that, kind of open-ended.
And then I have some comments, yes.
Okay. In both resources, there's a variety of different ways. That was one of the cool things about the mid-pilot check-ins, is we got to go and see all these different ways that data can be collected. Everything from observational data during lessons and input into the technology now versus the technology that we were dealing with before is vastly different, as I'm sure you can imagine, in 12 years. So so we can see everything from observational checklists to individualized student missions that are generated based on the data collected in alignment with standards. It's so there's so many different ways, and then there's a lot of alignment from what the companies have shown in data that show how the alignment between the data that's collected in their programs and then how that can be predictive towards results in other assessments like the SBA. And so a lot of that is actually built into the different resources.
A couple other things to think about in terms of data that you'd monitor. So there's SBA, there's all the data that Whitney was talking about, there's use of our screeners and progress monitors. And then there's a whole other set of data that if you look at a logic map or a strategy map of looking at change. So if we're looking at what we named as what we want in a classroom, and we also have some specifics around student achievement, we can backwards map that to student learning, student experience. So if that's what we want, then what should be happening in the classroom so that we have that student experience? And those are things that we can have as look-fors as well through thinking about administrators working with teachers or learning walks or those pieces. And then we also have to take that one step back of if teachers need to have these actions, what do they need to learn? So that's our professional learning strand of looking at what are the different ways that we're providing ways for teachers to learn in a very aligned way. And then behind that is what should building leaders be doing and then what should building leaders learn, and then what should central office do. But that logic map of all of those are places that we can monitor data, and we can adjust as we go through, looking at looking at student outcomes as our experiences and outcomes as our goal. But there's the logic map of all the pieces that we can monitor and adjust between Dr. Holman and a kindergarten teacher.
And so a results policy is about the outcomes students are achieving. And so a lot of the data you heard are kind of ancillary. You know, they surround a student, and at the end of the day, results monitoring is like, are they able to demonstrate their learning? It's like a thumbs up or thumbs down. And so I think as we start to learn whichever curriculum is selected, what data sources are there, then we have to think, how do these data sources, how are they kept, and how can they reliably be reported, such that if it is an actual direct outcome measure, that if we can capture it and it makes sense as part of the board's monitoring, it could also be used for progress monitoring along the way. And so it sort of depends on the curriculum, the tools, and things like that. I can only imagine that the tools are so much more sophisticated than they used to be. Wonders, I'll say, as they used to be. And so that's very exciting. Dr. Rose touched on a piece that I want to emphasize. And when we say all students literate by third grade and, you know, all of these like aspirational things, what we're not saying is, doggone it, teachers, teach harder and you're just going to get better results. Like, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying, oh, if we just had a curriculum that, you know, teachers could teach, then we're going to get great results for kids. It's actually, the whole system has to shift if we want better outcomes for kids. And you can hold me accountable to what I said last Monday. I said, if we have technical training to understand the curriculum resource that we're going to ask our teachers to go through, there's a whole series of leaders, including the superintendent, that should be going through that same training, because if we actually want different results and outcomes, we're going to have to approach this differently. And so we all have to change our practices. We all have to change our ways of being if we actually want to shift. And I pulled up in our data dashboard, you know, our historical SBA outcomes for third grade. And it is just such a flat line. And that has everything to do with a system needing to shift and change. And I'm part of that. My team's part of that. Central office is part of that. Administrators are part of that. Teachers are part, like, engaging parents is part, like, it's an entire system shift that's going to have to happen. It isn't just, let's adopt a nice new tool and come on, teachers, just work a little bit harder. Because I guarantee you our teachers are working super hard right now. And so it's all of us that are going to need to think differently about how do we attend to aspirational statements and goals such as all students literate by third grade. And so as we were talking last Monday in preparation for tonight, we started talking about how do we think about making sure as we are launching a new curriculum, it's lessons learned from the last time we did this. And because, right, yeah, a couple of us were, but, you know, what are the lessons we've learned from successful curriculum adoptions along the way? How do we partner with, you know, our building leaders? How do we partner with LWA? How do we, like, there's all sorts of partnerships that have to be, you know, forged to ensure that how we move forward is obviously in the best interest of kids, but it's also supportive of the adults through the system. So It's a long way of saying it's a systems problem that we need to address, and it isn't a singular part of that system. And I would imagine if a teacher were listening, to us talking about all students literate by third grade, they would get the sense of, well, that's on my shoulders. Well, it's on all of our shoulders to accomplish that. It's partnership with our teachers. It's why we're thinking about our evaluation systems and our processes differently, and that it's about partnership and reflection, and because to accomplish that is really, really difficult and hard, and it isn't one person who's going to be able to accomplish that on their own. So that's what I wanted to say after all of that.
Director Richter?
I love everything you had to say, Superintendent Holman, and I'm going to just like bounce it back at you. You were talking a lot about teachers, and yes, thank the teachers. Thank you to teachers for all that they do. I love the way when you two were talking about where this curriculum was coming from, you could tell this was centered in teachers want these, teachers ask for this. So I love that it was coming from that direction. I think that there's undoubtedly some budget conversation to be had later about the bigger picture that you're talking about and the systems and how can we affect things. I'm not a teacher. I was trying to do some research before this, and what I found made sense to me, which is we're thinking about literacy by third grade, but second grade is highly predictive of third grade, and first grade is highly predictive of second grade, and kindergarten is highly predictive of, you get the point. And so that's kind of where I was like thinking about R2. Well, okay, we can choose third grade as a point, but it's everything that comes before that. And so that's when I'm thinking about data and how do we track that. So that's why I was asking about that. And I will also say that when I saw the pie chart that's in there, and it's pointing out there's this 20% that needs more help, and then you go to I think it's 2 slides down, and there's our R2 results, and about 20% aren't meeting standards. I'm like, oh, that could be correlation. It could not. So that was interesting to me. So I don't think there was many questions in there. That was just me telling you some things that I thought.
Director Yoakum?
One more. Will this committee continue to meet after the adoption? You had mentioned using staff from each building to sort of check the pulse of staff, and just wondering if that's going to occur through the first year, or like when does the committee end?
I don't know if the committee members signed up for this because they've already been with us for 5 years, but which was started as a 2-year commitment, but they're awesome and they're really committed to this work. And so I think that we're going to build in, like we did with social studies, we meet and confer with the social studies adoption committee and get them to actually, we've noticed some things that teachers are asking for, so they're coming together at the end of this month. So really it's ongoing, and I feel like the teachers are so committed to reading success in our district that they would probably be with us as long as we need them.
Dr. Holman, you talked about the ways that the whole system has to shift from you on down to the teachers. What about the board? What do we need to do to help? What does the board taking this on our shoulders look like? And that's not just to Dr. Holman, to any of you.
Mm-hmm. I know this won't surprise you, but I believe in rigorous monitoring and ensuring that we're continuing to look at the right data for the board to understand outcomes for kids. There is typically an implementation dip. Anytime you bring on new materials, you typically see a slight dip. Given all of the work that's gone into literacy, professional learning, the tools that we still have in the system that we'll continue to be using, I don't know what that means for literacy outcomes as we're bringing on a new tool. And so I just being hyper-focused on the right things, I think, is really the role of the board. And as we're progress monitoring, partnering with myself, my team, to bring forward, data elements that tell a story about the progress that the system is making. And yes, progress monitoring is about student data. And in this sense, there is also data related to implementation that I think is important for the board to look at as well, because then that translates to student outcomes. So that's my initial thought.
I don't know that I have a great answer to this, but I'm thinking about like one of the things, so your question is what's missing from the curriculum. My question is always, what are the things that are going to make this be hard? And how do we think forward about that? And I know our elementary teachers are working incredibly hard and have lots of change they've been managing over time as well. And so I guess for the board, or for like even to myself, thinking about listening with empathy and recognizing the urgency of change, and there are human beings that are working on that. And I was thinking about so we've had multiple adoptions over the past couple of years, like math in 2020, social studies in 2024, science in 2019. So there's been a lot of change. And I think about the curriculum companies. Every last one of them will say things like, if you really cared about students, you would prioritize this. You'd prioritize social studies, math, all those things. And so it's way more complex than that. And we are working on prioritizing literacy, but knowing that doesn't mean math doesn't exist. So I guess that's one of the things that I just think about a mindset of the board, and my own mindset is recognizing we feel urgency around change, and we are all human beings working at as fast as we can to achieve results for students, and thinking about the human beings. And so really thinking about that strategy map piece, and to Dr. Holman's point, it isn't telling anyone to work harder or please never say work smarter. It's really thinking about how do we work humanely and to a purpose.
Any other questions? I did want to ask you about the intervention piece, which we actually haven't talked about a lot, is thinking about the 20-ish% of students who we know will need something more beyond Tier 1. What are you envisioning for what that might look like? Is that a separate adoption that will be a follow-on? Is that part of this work? I don't know if you have any initial thoughts on that.
What the two tools offer are different around the intervention materials. So it would really be tailoring our response to whichever one we move forward with. We do have very sound evidence-based tools in place for those foundational, because we prioritize K2 as far as service and safety net, because we can be the most accelerative there. So thinking about telling you right now what is the intervention plan given the two resources, it would be hard to say because it will be different with either one. But it will honestly be leaning into the evidence-based resources we have and looking at the tool and what it has to offer, and then providing guidance for that, and being able to support teachers to have the resources to do the initial Tier 2 scaffold and support for kids with the resources that are provided.
Dr. Meekhoff.
I have a question that kind of bounces off of that. In terms of students that maybe struggle with attendance, how does attendance impact accessing this curriculum?
So we know that when students aren't in school, we aren't able to teach them the skills and accelerate their learning. I think that the idea of having a portion of every school, every reading block be small group instruction, what the largest hope for is that when the students do, because there are always really often legitimate reasons why kids can't be there, but the teacher will know the student well, They'll know where they are in their journey and be able to, when they have them in small group in class, be able to accelerate them, do a data-based acceleration.
And we will have a much better answer a year from now after we've had some time with whatever curriculum we choose. Or more thorough. Not that was an excellent answer, but just thinking about what we need to know and like what's missing in the curriculum. The other piece I'll say is that we are really tough customers when it comes to instructional resources in terms of really demanding high quality and like current research. And so that's been one of the things that also had us extend this adoption, was really trying to push for like, there's a lot of just on the cusp out there in terms of instructional resources, and we have wanted to make sure that we are able to take advantage of that. So we'll get to know the resources, and we'll be thinking about how they locate within our system and then within each classroom.
Can small group instruction be used for students who are already reading at grade level to accelerate growth at, not just for sort of, okay, these students need additional assistance? Or how do you think about how, say, highly capable learners fit into the system?
All of our curricular tools have extension. Either curricular tool we go with has extensions, and I've actually been out in schools where teachers have asked that question around, will the resource provide us with what to do for kids who already know it? And we are confident that what we select will have resources for students who already know it, and that small group instruction, although for the students furthest from justice, may occur with a greater frequency than students who already are achieving, that there's still direct instruction by the teacher weekly, more than once typically, and that they are giving students meaningful, just right instruction. And once students are learning to read, that's when you can get in, once they've broken the code to understand the text, there's so much you can do with building background knowledge and having them really analyze text, and such. So small group instruction is important for all students.
Any last questions? If not, since there are no other agenda items, the February 23rd, 2026 study session. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. We were going to come back to this. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. I didn't say the I didn't say the A word.
I need to hear from you,
yeah,
like how might, and we don't have to go around and do each statement, but just really how might you adapt it, or is there anything you want to add or adapt or remove? And this is just reflecting back on your own dream statement.
We all did that amazing right off the bat.
No, you're good. All right. Kind of, we were hoping that a little bit, that, that really, that we weren't giving you information that was going to say, oh no, now our dream needs to be different. So thank you for letting Whit and I come to present to you today. It's always a pleasure to get to know you a little better and to share the great work that this human being is championing every single day.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. Yes. Okay, now there are no other agenda items. So the February 23rd, 2026 study session is now adjourned at 6:29 p.m.